Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by asking you to close your eyes for a second.
What?
Unless you're driving, please don't do that. But try to conjure up a smell.
A smell. All right, I'm with you.
I'm thinking of a mix of industrial floor wax, the starch on a new pair of stiff denim jeans, maybe a faint whiff of popcorn from a kiosk 50 yards away.
And the air conditioning. You can't forget that distinct sort of recycled air scent.
Yes, exactly. You are describing the sensory profile of the American mall.
Without a doubt.
I am. But specifically, I'm describing the anchor, the big box at the end of the hall, the place where you got your back-to-school clothes, your dad got his work socks, and maybe, just maybe, your mom got a portrait taken with a backdrop that looked like a fake library.
We are definitely talking about JCPenney.
We are, of course, talking about JCPenney, a name that, for better or worse, is practically tattooed on the psyche of the American middle class.
It really is. And here's the thing. If you just look at the headlines or just, the general vibe of retail over the last 20 years, this company should be dead.
It should be a ghost.
Statistically, yes. It should have gone the way of Montgomery Ward or Sears or any number of those regional department stores that just couldn't figure out the internet.
Right. But it's not dead. It is 2026, and JCPenney is still here. But the version of it that exists today, it's not the store your grandma shopped in.
Not even close.
It has morphed into something so strange, so complex, and so, I think, indicative of where the global economy is right now. As of last year, 2025, it's part of this massive entity called Catalyst Brands.
Which is a sentence that would have made absolutely zero sense to the founder in 1902.
Not a lick of sense. We're talking about a joint venture involving Shane, the ultra-fast fashion giant.
The algorithm company that sells clothes.
Yes. Authentic Brands Group, and the literal owners of the malls themselves. It's like a retail Frankenstein's monster.
It is a fascinating mutation, for sure.
So our mission today is to figure out how we got here. How does a company start in a mining town in Wyoming, based on the literal golden rule from the Bible?
Which is an incredible origin story in itself.
And end up as a property-owned asset in a global conglomerate that is heavily tied to algorithmic fast fashion.
I think to understand that, you have to look at the arc of the American consumer. Because JCPenney's history is basically a mirror held up to the American middle class.
That's a great way to put it.
When the middle class was booming, Penny's was booming. When the middle class got squeezed, Penny's got squeezed. And when the middle class started having a major identity crisis.
Well, Penny's hired an Apple executive and went completely off the rails.
Oh, we are definitely going to spend some time on the Ron Johnson era. That is a masterclass in how to completely alienate your most loyal customers.
It really is. But let's rewind. Let's go all the way back.
Yeah.
1902.
The turn of the century. A different world.
We have this guy, James Cash Penney. And first off, I have to ask, Cash is his actual middle name.
It is. A bit of destiny there, maybe. He was born in Hamilton, Missouri. And honestly, he wasn't a guy who looked like a future retail mogul. He was a very strictly religious man, very, very principled.
Right.
And the reason he ended up out west wasn't because he was, chasing gold or glory. It was because his lungs were bad.
The classic go west for the air prescription from the doctor.
Exactly that. His doctor told him the Missouri humidity was going to kill him. So he needed the dry air of Colorado. So he moves, he bounces around a bit, works a few odd jobs, and eventually lands a clerk position with these two guys, Thomas Callahan and Guy Johnson.
And their store had a very memorable name.
They owned a chain of stores called The Golden Rule.
Which sounds incredibly quaint to us now, maybe even a little cheesy.
It does, but you have to understand the context of retail, especially in, the Wild West at the time. It was predatory.
How so?
There was no standardized pricing. If you walked into a store and the clerk thought you looked like you had money, the price went up. If you needed credit, the interest rates were, frankly, usurious.
So it was a haggle culture.
It was a haggle culture and very much a buyer beware culture. Callahan and Johnson ran their store differently. They had fixed prices. They sold honest goods. They believed in treating the customer the way you want to be treated.
Hence the golden rule.
Hence the name. And Penny, being this deeply principled guy, he just vibed with that immediately.
It fit his whole worldview.
Perfectly. And he worked harder than anyone else. So in 1902, the owners make him a proposition. They're opening a new store in Kemmerer, Wyoming.
I looked up Kemmerer. Even today, it's tiny. In 1902, it must have been just a mining camp.
That's all it was. It was rough. Coal miners, sheep herders. Not exactly the fashion capital of the world.
No.
But Penny sees an opportunity. He takes his entire life savings, which wasn't much, and he takes out a loan to buy a one-third partnership in this new store.
Okay, this partnership detail is really key, right? This isn't just him being a manager. He has skin in the game.
That is the secret sauce. That is the whole innovation. Most chain stores at the time, like Woolworths, were centralized. The guy running the local store was just an employee on a salary.
So he might not care as much.
Right. Penny believed that if the manager actually owned a piece of the store, they would work harder, they wouldn't steal, and they would know their customers intimately because their own livelihood depended on it.
So he opens the doors. It's called the Golden Rule. It's cash only, no credit.
Which was a huge, huge risk in a mining town where almost everyone lived on credit until payday. But his prices were lower because he didn't have to cover the cost of bad debts from other customers.
That's smart.
And people flocked to it. They made, I think it was $29,000 in the first year.
Which is, what, in today's money? Almost $1 million?
In that ballpark, yeah. It was a massive success for a tiny store in the middle of nowhere.
So the model works.
The model absolutely works. And as Penny bought out his original partners in 1907 and started expanding, he kept that golden rule partnership model. He'd find a bright young clerk, usually a man in those days, let's be honest.
Of course.
He'd train him up and then say, okay, you're ready. Go open a store in Utah. I'll put up 2/3 of the money, you put up 1/3, and you are the partner.
It's almost like a biological cell dividing. It's a franchise model before franchising was really a thing.
It was viral growth before that term existed, and the growth was just staggering. By 1912, there were 34 stores in the Rocky Mountains. In 1913, they incorporate as the JCPenny company.
And they moved the headquarters, right?
Right. First to Salt Lake City in 1909 to be near the banks and railroads, then a huge leap to New York City in 1914
Why New York?
to be near the manufacturers. It just simplified buying and shipping. It cut out so many middlemen, and the numbers just explode from there.
Give me the stats.
It's vertical. 1917, 175 stores, 1924. The 500th store opens in Penny's hometown of Hamilton, Missouri.
A nice little homecoming for him.
And then, just 4 years later, 1928, the 1,000th store.
1,000 stores in about 25 years. Imagine the logistics of that in the 1920s. No computers, no internet.
Just telegraphs and ledgers and trains. It was a masterpiece of logistics. Gross business hit $190 million in 1928. Adjusted for inflation, that's well over $3 billion. This was a juggernaut.
I want to pause on a detail from the outline that really blew my mind. There's a connection between JCPenney and another retail empire that comes much later.
Ah, the Sam Walton connection.
Yes, before Sam Walton founded Walmart.
Yeah.
Before he became the richest man in America. He was a penny associate.
That's right. 1940, Des Moines, Iowa. Fresh out of college with an economics degree, a young Sam Walton gets a job as a management trainee at JCPenney for about $75 a month.
Was he any good at it?
By all accounts, he was a terrible clerk. He absolutely hated the paperwork. His manager said his books were always a mess, and this is the Walton part, he was a genius at selling.
He was a people person.
He loved the customers. He would go out on the sidewalk to bring people in. He could sell anything to anyone. He just had that charisma.
It's fascinating to think about him walking those aisles, learning the systems, seeing how a big retailer operates from the inside.
He absorbed the efficiency. He absorbed the concept of customer service that Penny's was built on. But he also saw the inefficiencies. He saw the bureaucracy that was starting to creep into this now massive company.
So he learned what to do and what not to do.
In a way, yes. You could argue that Walmart was built on the lessons Sam Walton learned at Penny's. He took that golden rule concept of customer service, stripped away all the department store frills, and then just weaponized the supply chain.
So JCPenney inadvertently trained the guy who would eventually become their biggest nightmare.
In a manner of speaking, yes. The student became the master, or maybe the disruptor.
Okay, let's move forward in time. Let's go to the post-war era, the 1950s and 60s. This is really when the JCPenney that most of us would recognize starts to form.
The modern era begins here.
The logo becomes iconic. They start doing national advertising in big magazines like Life. They issue their first JCPenney credit card in 1959.
Which was a huge departure from the cash-only roots.
A massive change. But the biggest shift of all is in real estate.
The mall age. This is the second great era of the company. Before this, Penny's was a Main Street store. You went downtown to shop. But in the late 50s and early 60s, America moves to the suburbs.
The car culture takes over.
The car is king, and retail has to follow the people.
So they open their first full-line shopping center store in 1961. in New Jersey.
Audubon, New Jersey. And that term full line is a piece of industry jargon we should probably unpack because it meant something very specific and very important to the consumer.
It basically means they started selling everything, right? Not just clothes.
Literally everything. Up until this point, Penny's was mostly soft goods, clothes, shoes, towels, fabrics. But to be a true mall anchor, they needed to compete head-to-head with Sears.
The other giant of the era.
And Sears sold the heavy stuff, so Penny's brought in the heavy stuff.
So give me the inventory list. What are we talking about?
Okay, you've got major appliances, refrigerators, stoves, washing machines, all private label or through partnerships with big names like General Electric.
Okay.
You've got sporting goods, tools, lawn and garden equipment.
And cars. I saw a note about auto centers.
Auto centers. This was huge. You could pull your Ford Country Squire station wagon into the JCPenney Auto Center, get new tires, get an oil change, buy a new battery, and while that was happening, you'd go inside and buy a suit for church and a new blender for the kitchen.
A one-stop shop for the suburban family.
And firearms. Let's not forget the firearms.
Right. You mentioned this. Up until the mid-'80s, it was totally normal for department stores like Penny's and Sears to sell rifles and shotguns.
Absolutely. You could buy a JCPenney branded shotgun right next to the socks and underwear.
That is just, it's so hard to process in 2026.
A different world. It was the American General Store concept, scaled up to the size of an aircraft hangar and dropped in the middle of a sea of asphalt.
They also tried to get into the discount game around this time, didn't they? I saw something in our notes about a store called the Treasury.
Right. 1962 is a legendary year in retail history. It's the year that Walmart, Kmart, and Target were all founded.
All in the same year. Wow.
All in 62. JCPenney saw this wave coming. They were smart enough to realize that discount was going to be a huge sector, so they tried to get in on it by acquiring a small chain and rebranding it as the Treasury.
Why have I never heard of the Treasury?
Because it failed. It struggled along for about 20 years, and they finally shut it down in the early 80s.
So why did it fail when Target and Walmart became these global behemoths?
I think it's the classic innovator's dilemma. JCPenney was a department store. They had a certain cost structure, a certain culture built around service and presentation. Trying to run a bare-bones, low-margin discount operation inside a culture built on, quality and service.
It clashed.
It clashed. They couldn't get the costs down low enough to really compete with Kmart on price, and they never developed the cheap chic factor that made Target so successful. It was the stuck-in-the-middle problem.
A theme that is going to come up again and again with this company.
It's a defining theme of their entire modern history.
Speaking of being stuck, or rather, stuck together,
Yeah.
we have to talk about the 1964 Alaska earthquake. This story is incredible.
Oh, this is such a defining moment for the brand's soul, for that golden rule DNA.
So 1964, a massive 9.2 magnitude earthquake hits Anchorage. The Penny store there is just, it's wrecked.
The building partially collapsed. I believe one person, an employee, was actually killed in the collapse. It was a tragedy. The structural damage was total.
So any normal corporation looking at a spreadsheet would say,
They'd say, okay, take the insurance money, cut our losses, and leave. It's Alaska. It's expensive to operate there anyway.
but they didn't do that.
They did the opposite. They doubled down. They rebuilt the store bigger and better than before. And they did something else. They built a parking garage attached to it, which was the first public parking garage in the entire city of Anchorage.
That feels like such a community pillar kind of move. It's more than just retail.
It solidified their loyalty in that region for generations. It wasn't just a store. It was a partner in the rebuilding of the city. That's the golden rule in action, but at a corporate scale.
That's a great story. So moving into the 70s, the founder, James Cash Penney, dies in 1971. He was 95.
A long life. And the company honored him by closing all the stores for his funeral. It was truly the end of the patriarch.
And it's almost poetic that the company hits its peak store count right after he's gone. 1973. 2,053 stores.
That is total saturation. You could not go anywhere in America without being near a Penny's.
But then, the 1974 recession hits. The oil crisis.
And the stock gets hammered.
It drops by 2/3.
Yeah. Inflation was rampant. People stopped buying new refrigerators and new lawnmowers. And the executives in New York started to look at the books and say, wait a minute, these hard goods, the appliances, the auto parts, the paint, they take up a lot of space, they're expensive to ship, and the margins are razor thin.
Whereas a pair of jeans or a blouse.
High margin, easy to ship, high turnover, takes up way less square footage.
So this crisis forces a reckoning. It sets up the next big pivot for the company, the 1980s identity crisis.
It does. They decide to stop being the everything store.
This was the 1983 shift, a massive strategic gamble. They spent over $1 billion remodeling hundreds of stores to get rid of the automotive centers, the paint, the hardware, the lawnmowers.
They wanted to be a fashion destination.
They were saying, we are not Sears, we are something else.
Exactly. We are not a hardware store with clothes. We are a department store for apparel. And to prove it, they did something that was considered absolute heresy in the fashion world at the time.
They signed a deal with Halston.
Halston, the guy who dressed Jackie Kennedy, the guy who was a fixture at Studio 54 with Andy Warhol and Liza Minnelli.
The king of American high fashion.
The king. And JCPenney, the middle American department store, signs him to a 6-year, $1 billion deal to create an exclusive line called Halston III.
Today, we see this all the time. Target does it with designers.
Yeah.
H&M does it with Versace. But in 1983...
it was nuclear. The high fashion world was absolutely horrified. They saw it as Halston cheapening his brand, selling his soul.
Backlash was real.
Oh, it was immediate, vicious. The high-end department store Bergdorf Goodman, which carried Halston's main couture line, was so offended that they dropped him. They put out a statement saying, "We cannot sell the same designer that is being sold at JCPenney."
Wow. The snobbery was just off the charts.
It completely destroyed Halston's high-end business. And the real tragedy of it all is that the line didn't even work at Penny's.
Why not? Was the stuff ugly?
No. By all accounts, the designs were great. But the JCPenney customer in 1983 wasn't ready for it. They walked in looking for sturdy school clothes and affordable workwear, and here was this slick, minimalist Halston stuff that felt too fancy, too expensive, or just not for them.
It was a brand disconnect.
A total disconnect. And on the flip side, the wealthy people who wanted the Halston name were never, ever going to be caught dead walking into a JCPenney to buy it.
So they alienated the snobs and confused their regulars.
Precisely. The worst of both worlds. The line was discontinued after just a year. Halston's career never really recovered. It was a disaster.
But you could argue it was ahead of its time.
That's the huge but in this story. It was the right idea, just at the wrong time. 2 decades later, Isaac Mizrahi goes to Target, and it's a smash hit. Penny's was visionary, but they paid the price for being the first one through the wall.
So the big fashion gamble didn't quite save them. What do they try next? In the 90s, they take a detour that I had honestly completely forgotten about until I read these notes. Drugstores.
The great diversification. The acquisition spree.
They bought Thrift Drug, and they bought Kerr Drug, Phase Drug, and then the whale, Eckerd, in 1996.
For a while there, JCPenney was one of the largest pharmacy operators in the entire United States.
What was the logic behind that? If they don't buy a dress, they'll definitely buy their insulin.
That's basically it. It was about demographics and frequency. The department store business is very cyclical. You shop for back to school in August, for Christmas in December, maybe for Easter.
A few big trips a year.
Right. But you need toothpaste and prescriptions every single month. They wanted to smooth out those revenue bumps. They also looked at the aging boomer population and thought, healthcare is the future.
It makes sense on a PowerPoint slide.
It does. But execution is everything. Running a national pharmacy chain is fundamentally different from running a fashion retailer. The supply chains are different. The government regulations are different. The labor models are different.
So management was split. They were distracted.
Completely distracted. The department store started to look a little shabby and neglected because all the corporate attention was focused on integrating these massive drugstore chains.
And were the drugstores even doing well?
Not as well as competitors like Walgreens or CVS, who did only that. They were masters of that business. So by 2004, Penny's board realizes, we aren't good at this. We've lost our focus.
So they sold it all off.
They sold the Eckerd division to CVS and Rite Aid, took the cash, and retreated back to the mall.
It feels like they spent 20 years trying to be something else. A high fashion house, a healthcare company, only to come to the conclusion that they were just a department store.
And by the time they came back to focus on that department store, the world had changed again. It's the mid-2000s.
Right.
The middle class that Penny's had always relied on was shrinking. Wages were stagnating, and the competition was just brutal. You had Walmart and Target eating their lunch from the bottom, and you had Macy's and Nordstrom eating it from the top.
Penny's was stuck in that mushy middle again.
The most dangerous place to be in retail. And of course, the internet is starting to become a serious threat.
Amazon is rising.
Amazon is on the ascent.
But they did have one big win in the 2000s, something that brought a lot of people back into the stores.
Sephora.
the Sephora deal in 2006.
A huge win. Absolutely brilliant. They strike a deal to put Sephora stores within a store. This brought in a whole new customer. It brought in young women who probably wouldn't have been caught dead in the polyester pants section, but they would come in for Fenty Beauty or Urban Decay.
It was an injection of cool. It gave people a reason to go to Penny's.
It did. And it arguably kept them alive for another decade. But the board of directors, they weren't satisfied. The core business was still struggling. The stock was stagnant. The store felt dated. They wanted a revolution.
And in 2011, they hired a revolutionary. Or maybe more like a Jacobin who brought out the guillotine.
They hired Ron Johnson.
The man from Apple.
The man who built the Apple Store. The Genius Bar. The glass cubes. The sleek, minimalist aesthetic. He was the golden boy of retail. He could do no wrong.
And the board basically handed him the keys and said, take this dusty, cluttered department store and turn it into Apple.
And he tried. Oh boy, did he try.
He came in with a machete.
He came in and he looked at JCPenney's entire business model and he just hated it. Specifically, he hated the coupons.
Explain this to me. Because my most vivid memory of JCPenney is my mom having a stack of their coupons the size of a phone book.
That was the drug. That was the entire business model. JCPenney and most department stores operated on what's called a high-low pricing model.
Right.
They would price a shirt at, say, $50, but nobody ever paid $50. Then they would have a sale and mark it down to $30, and then they would send you a coupon in the mail for an extra $10 off.
So you'd buy the shirt for $20, and you'd feel like a financial genius. I saved $30.
It's the thrill of the hunt. It's pure psychology. It's gamification. Ron Johnson looked at that and said, this is dishonest. It's inefficient. It's tacky.
He wanted transparent pricing.
He wanted fair and square pricing. That was the slogan. Just price the shirt at $20 every day. No coupons, no sales, just the right price all the time.
Which, intellectually, is sound. It's logical.
It is perfectly logical. And it was a complete and utter catastrophe.
Because shoppers aren't logical creatures.
Shoppers are emotional creatures. When he took away the coupons, he took away the dopamine hit of getting a deal. Customers would walk in, see that same shirt for $20, and their brain would say, wait, this shirt is usually marked $50. If it's only $20, it must be cheap quality.
Or they just miss the feeling of winning.
They miss the game. It's like telling a gambler, we're just going to give you the mathematical average of your winnings every week, but you can't pull the slot machine handle anymore. You take the fun out of it.
So they just stopped coming.
They stopped coming in droves. Sales plummeted. We're talking a 25% drop in revenue in a single year. That is unheard of for a company of this size. It was a death spiral.
And he was trying to change the store layout too, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. He wanted to create town squares. He wanted little boutiques for different brands. He wanted coffee bars and hangout spots. He wanted to get rid of the central checkout counters and have employees roaming around with iPads to check you out.
Just like the Apple Store.
Exactly. But buying a sweater isn't like buying an iPad. You don't need a genius to explain the features of a sweater to you. You just want to find your size, pay, and leave. The customers were confused. The employees were demoralized. It was a culture clash of epic proportions.
So how long did he last? It wasn't long.
17 months. He was fired in April 2013. But the damage was done. He had burned through the company's cash reserves. He had completely alienated the core customer, that older mom who lived for her coupons. And once you break a customer's habit, it's very, very hard to get them back.
And while all this chaos was happening in the physical stores, there was something shady going on behind the scenes online, right? The spam dexing scandal.
Oh, this is a legendary cautionary tale for any digital marketer. In early 2011, the New York Times publishes this expose. They found that JCPenney's website was ranking #1 on Google for basically everything.
Like what kind of terms?
Generic terms. Dresses, bedding, furniture, skinny jeans. These are terms that are usually impossible for one single site to dominate because they're so competitive.
So how are they doing it?
They were cheating. They had hired an SEO firm that was using black hat techniques. They placed thousands of paid links to jcpenny.com on completely unrelated garbage websites. We're talking about links buried in the text of sites about dog training, online gambling, obscure music fan pages.
And these links tricked Google's algorithm.
They tricked the algorithm into thinking that JCPenney was the most authoritative and popular site on the web for all these topics.
Google. They noticed.
Google takes this kind of thing personally. When the story broke, Google dropped the hammer. They applied a manual penalty. And overnight, JCPenney basically disappeared from search results. If you typed in JCPenney dresses, You couldn't even find their own website.
They were digitally erased?
They were sent to digital Siberia at the exact moment they needed online sales to save them from the Ron Johnson disaster in the stores. It was a brutal 1-2 punch that really broke the company's back.
So Johnson is fired. They bring back the old CEO, Mike Ullman, just to try and stabilize the ship. But from 2015 to 2019, it just feels like a slow bleed.
It was. They were saddled with billions in debt from the Johnson era. They were closing stores in waves. They tried these desperate pivots like bringing back appliances again in 2016, trying to target millennials buying homes.
How'd that go?
They dumped them again in 2019. It lasted less than 3 years. It was just flailing. They even did a pop-up shop in Manhattan called JCPenney.
Please tell me that was a joke.
It was an attempt at self-deprecating humor. People had been calling it JCPenney as a joke for years to make it sound fancy, so they tried to lean into it. They had Nicole Richie host a launch party in Soho.
Did it work?
It was cute, I guess, but it didn't solve the fundamental problem that they had $4 billion in debt and nobody was buying their clothes.
And then, the ultimate indignity. The stock price drops below $1.
December 2018, the penny stock joke became literal. It was a sign that Wall Street had given up.
Then comes 2020. The final nail in the coffin. Or so we all thought.
COVID-19, the global pandemic. For a retailer that was already on life support, having to shut all your doors for months on end should have been the final fatal blow. Revenue went to zero overnight.
And right before they file for bankruptcy, there's this headline about executive bonuses that just looked awful.
This made people so furious. Just days before filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in May 2020, the company paid out nearly $10 million in bonuses to the top executives. The CEO at the time, Jill Soltau, got $4.5 million.
While they are furloughing tens of thousands of store employees with no pay.
Exactly. The corporate logic is that these are retention bonuses. If the captain jumps ship in the middle of the storm, the ship sinks faster. You need to pay the leadership to stay and guide the company through the complex bankruptcy process so there is something left on the other side.
But the optics are terrible.
The optics are just brutal. To the average person, it looks like looting the vault before the building burns down.
So they file May 15th, 2020. They get delisted from the New York Stock Exchange after 91 years. It really looks like liquidation is inevitable. But then the landlords step in.
This is the most important and strangest part of the modern story. Simon Property Group and Brookfield Property Partners. These are the two biggest mall owners in America.
And they buy JCPenney out of bankruptcy.
They do, for about $800 million in cash and debt assumption.
So why? Why would a landlord want to own a failing department store? Do they just really love Arizona jeans that much?
No. They love their leases. You have to understand a crucial piece of real estate law called the co-tenancy clause.
Okay, unpack that for us.
In a typical mall lease, the smaller stores like the Gap or Bath & Body Works or the Pretzel Stand, they often have a clause in their contract that says, if an anchor tenant, which is JCPenney, closes or leaves, I'm allowed to break my lease or pay significantly reduced rent.
Ah, I see. So if JCPenney goes dark?
It triggers a domino effect, a death spiral for the mall. If Penny's closes, the mall owners don't just lose Penny's rent, they could lose the rent from 50 other stores, or they have to lower everyone's rent drastically. The value of the mall property itself completely collapses.
So they bought JCPenney not to make money selling clothes, but to prevent their entire real estate empire from imploding.
It was a defensive acquisition. They effectively paid $800 million just to keep the lights on so that the rest of the mall wouldn't die. It's real estate arbitrage masquerading as retail.
That is deeply cynical, but also kind of brilliant.
From a business perspective, it's genius. And look, it saved nearly 60,000 jobs, so it was a good outcome for the workers. But it fundamentally changed what the company is. It is now a tenant owned by its landlord. The incentives are completely different.
Which brings us to the present day of our source material, the post-bankruptcy era,
Right.
2025 and 2026, the Catalyst Brands era.
This is where the landlords are getting creative. They realize that just keeping the lights on isn't a long-term strategy. They need to actually drive traffic. So they form this massive new joint venture called Catalyst Brands.
And this combines JCPenney with another group called the Spark Group.
Exactly. Spark is another joint venture owned by the same people that owns the intellectual property for brands like Forever 21, Aeropostale, Brooks Brothers, and even Reebok.
And the really wild card partner in all of this is Shane.
The Chinese fast fashion app, the biggest fashion retailer in the world by sheer volume.
So what's the play here?
The play is synergy. Shein is a digital monster, but they have a physical world problem. Returns are a nightmare for them, and they have no physical presence to let people see and touch the product.
And JCPenney has.
JCPenney has over 600 huge boxes with loading docks, parking lots, and existing staff all across America.
I see the vision. JCPenney becomes the physical interface for the digital giants.
That's it exactly. You walk into a JCPenney in 2026 and you see a Forever 21 shop in shop. You see a dedicated return desk for your Shein haul. You see a Reebok concept shop. The department store is becoming a brand platform.
It's less about a curated selection by JCPenney buyers and more about renting out square footage to whoever has the heat at the moment.
It's a logistics hub with fitting rooms. And in a way, it finally solves the Ron Johnson problem. You don't need to make the JCPenney brand itself cool. You just need to fill it with brands that are cool, or at least popular, and use that massive real estate footprint as a strategic asset.
Before we wrap this all up, I want to touch on the one thing that has remained weirdly constant through all this chaos: the private brands. Because when I think of pennies, I don't really think of Shein. I think of St. John's Bay.
The unsung heroes. The private label strategy is arguably why the stores survived this long in the first place. They have huge margins because there's no middleman.
I saw in the notes their oldest private brand is Big Mac Workwear.
Launched in 1922, it's over 100 years old, still going. It was created because suppliers in the early days often wouldn't sell to them, so Penny said, fine, we'll make our own.
And for my generation, it was the Arizona Jean Company.
The 90s powerhouse. If you couldn't afford Levi's or Guess, you wore Arizona. And you know what? They were good jeans.
They really were.
These brands, Worthington for women's workwear, Stafford for men's suits, and Brielle for lingerie, they have more brand loyalty than the store itself sometimes.
It's funny. The store keeps changing its entire corporate identity, but the socks remain the same.
And maybe that's the lesson. The stuff that's reliable and unglamorous is what endures.
So let's bring it home. We have traveled from a tiny cash-only store in a Wyoming mining town in 1902 to a landlord-owned global brand conglomerate in 2026. What is the big takeaway here?
I think the takeaway is resilience through mutation. JCPenney survived the Great Depression, it survived the rise of Walmart, it survived the retail apocalypse and the death of the mall, it survived Ron Johnson, it survived a global pandemic and bankruptcy.
It's the cockroach of American retail, and I mean that with the utmost respect.
It is, but the cost of that survival was arguably its original soul. The Golden Rule partnership model of 1902 was about people. It was about community managers building a local business. The Catalyst Brands model of 2026 is about assets. It's about leveraging square footage and data and logistics.
It feels like the end of the merchant prince era and the complete triumph of the asset manager.
That is exactly it. James Cash Penney was a merchant. The people who own it now are real estate investors. The store no longer exists to serve the community in the way he envisioned. It exists to serve the portfolio of the real estate investment trust.
So here is the thought I want to leave you with. The next time you walk into a mall, if you still do that, and you see that red square JCPenney logo, ask yourself, am I walking into a store? Or am I just walking into a load-bearing wall for the global financial system?
And if you buy a pair of socks while you're in there, does it even matter which one it is?
Deep questions for a department store deep dive. Thanks for unpacking this with us today.
My pleasure.
We'll see you on the next one.